in live series with the Women Business Collaborative on WBC Faster Together. We're getting a preview of the year ahead with Gwen Young, the new CEO of WBC. Gwen, thanks for having me for this conversation. And it's really an exciting time at WBC this year.
Kevin, thank you for joining us and for having this conversation. We're thrilled to have you on our LinkedIn Live series. And yeah, the world is, as we say, back in action and ready to go. And we are really excited for what the year ahead is bringing to WBC, but also to the business community in the world in which we live.
So WBC is this massive partnership opportunity for businesses to work together. Tell me a little bit about what your leadership is looking to do this year with WBC.
Thank you, Kevin. This year in 2024, what WBC really wants to do is sort of on a couple of things, continue our growth. So as you know, we are about 83 now partners, over 60 corporate sponsors and 300 champions. We want to continue to build this. We are an alliance. We are collaborative. We work together. That is the sole purpose and DNA of what WBC does. The second thing is we really want to work within the business landscape on issues like the rise of AI and technology, right, on issues of trade, which I know we'll be speaking about tomorrow and later in some of our events, but really talk about how diverse leadership, how commitments to diversity in the community make a difference in how we're all shaping the business landscape. And then thirdly, we're returning more and more, like many companies in many places, to a bit more in person. We've done a lot online. We still will continue to do our largest things online. But our resources are virtual and digital. There is access to those, and we want to bring as many audiences together. So we'll continue our virtual and digital presence, but we're really returning to some in-person events. So keep eyes out for those in the audience.
So Gwen, as I've gotten to know you over the last couple of weeks, one of the things that you always stress is faster together, faster together, faster together. And then this notion of momentum. And it seems like in the economy, when I speak to analysts up on Wall Street or on Main Street even, they're looking at the post-pandemic economy, and there's this sense of momentum heading into 2024. So what can you tell me about that, specifically as it relates to women in the workforce?
Perfect question. I mean, I think a couple of things are happening, but the interesting thing that's happening with this momentum is while you'll see the stats that'll say women are leaving the workforce in higher levels, well, what is happening is women-owned businesses are rising, and the number of women-owned businesses are rising, and it's especially large in the African American and Black communities of women-owned businesses, comprising almost 60% of the growth rate in that space, which I think is fantastic. You're also seeing, a slow but more rise of women CEOs. JetBlue just got a new women CEO. You're hearing from people like Jane Fraser as the CEO of Citigroup. So there's a lot going on, I think, in that space. And then, what we're seeing, globally is a continued momentum for multinational and global companies to kind of act in this poly crisis to continue to trade, be global, and look global. And I think that's incredibly important as well, because that's the rise of businesses, not just within the United States, but across the globe.
So one of the things that you've done is specifically looking for trailblazers in these sectors. And I know that your first Trailblazer Award has just been announced, and I don't want to get out ahead of it, but what can you share with us about this year's first Trailblazer Award?
Absolutely. So our first Trailblazer Award, WBC is presenting tomorrow at the Reagan Building for International Trade. And we are presenting it to Dr. Ngozi Okonjo-Iweala, who is the Director General of the World Trade Organization. And this is important, from a couple of things, not just that Dr. Ngozi has been a first in many of her fields, whether it's a finance minister in Nigeria, managing director of the World Bank, but also because right now in the United States, the leadership in trade is women-led, right? From USTR to USTDA to the WTO. So it's a really great time to be talking about what does trade look like, right? We've got issues like the Panama Canal, the Red Sea, the Ukraine war. We're still, coming out of COVID, so to speak. And the week following this is Davos. So it's really nice to be on stage for us to talk about the importance of women's leadership, in that trade area, the importance of women-led businesses, which is critical to trade, and how we talk about the growth of global companies, and that's incredibly important. So we're really excited because our award is given to people who have led, not just in women's leadership, kind of in what they've done, but in their communities and in their industries in which they've worked.
So, Her Excellency Dr. Ngozi Okonjo-Iweala, what specific, I mean, clearly she's a trailblazer, but what specific parts made her uniquely qualified for this very, I mean, it's a very prestigious award. So when you look specifically at where we are in this particular moment in the global economy, what made her such an important choice for the first one for this year?
I think she was an important choice. Dr. Ngozi Okonjo-Iweala was an important choice for a couple of reasons, right? So one is the first, right? She's led in the first. And I have actually worked with her in the past when I was in international development. She's always talked about equity, equity of opportunity, and gender equity in everything she does. So a perfect example is at the end of COP in December, she came out and said, you know, the inclusion of women in this discussion on all sides of the discussion of climate change is incredibly important. And so always bringing that dialogue to the table, her and Christine Lagarde together, talking about the role of women in trade, not to forget to think about all groups and to create a truly global and open and inclusive economy. And for us, that's the spirit of what we're trying to do. We're trying to create a diverse business landscape that thrives, that provides opportunities for all.
And she's joining a list of other trailblazers who have it's an incredibly impressive list. Who are some of the past recipients of the Trailblazer Award?
The past recipients of the Trailblazer Award include people like last year, we had Cindy Parlow-Cohn, the president of the U.S. Soccer Foundation, and Janet Yellen, the secretary of the Treasury. We've had Magic Johnson with what he's done with Sodexo Magic as one of our trailblazers. We've had Gina Davis, who has the Gina Davis Institute for Gender Equality out in Los Angeles, talking about gender roles in the film industry. So we've had this range, and what we do try to do is get them across sectors. You know, we have Sheila Johnson of Salamander Resorts for all the work she's done across industries and her leadership. So Dr. Okonjo-Iweala is joining this crowd, but really representing, you know, kind of the global nature of what Women Business Collaborative wants to be and the global nature of business today.
So, and I think that's important because one of the things that you've stressed to me just in our conversations, both on the record and off the record, has been it has to be this dialogue that also includes men. You know, let's be honest, I'm a man, and and you've always said, you know, that men have to be a part of this conversation, and that it has to be because men have to join this to understand how important this is. And so why is that important to you as you communicate about this to make sure that men are also a part of this conversation?
I think it's important from a couple angles. So first of all, like when I and we talk about equality of opportunity, equity, and inclusivity, that's everybody. So that is not just one group of individuals. You know, the second thing, quite frankly, is that, you know, we have to look at all participants in the population, whether they're consumers, business leaders, or the workforce. And that includes men, it includes women, it includes all women, it includes neurodiverse, you know, disabled. We have to include everybody into our conversation. But second, you know, and thirdly, men are in power, right? So if you're not going to work with the power structures, you know, with the people in power, with the great minds, right, of what you can do, you're never going to be able to change and create inclusivity or equity in the business landscape. You know, and the thinking and the intelligence and the ideas and the innovation and all of that. And finally, you know, in my past career in international development, we've learned from sort of talking to groups and creating safe spaces and learning sort of the needs of all members of the community, but bringing the communities together to talk about community-led and community-driven solutions. And you can't do that by having one sector of the community talking about it and coming out and saying, here's what we're going to do. So that power of it goes to the collaboration piece of it.
You have decades of experience in international development, and then tomorrow night when you're on stage and you're awarding the Trailblazer Award, you're also going to be joined, as you've alluded to, by two other top global leaders in trade. And so just that image, to be honest, on the eve of Davos at the World Economic Forum, of having three dominant global leaders in global business. I mean, between the three of them, I'm sure they're responsible for multi-billions of dollars worth of international business commerce. Just that image of, on that stage and what that represents is a pretty groundbreaking historic moment, is it not?
you and I have talked about this, or you come out, there's usually an analysis. How many women are on stage? Do we talk about women? Where are the women leaders? And there's people like the female quotient that run the Gender Equality Lounge at these to bring those women leaders together. And then there's the substantive discussions that say, let's include women, in the conversations. This is powerful. This is undeniable. When people say, does it matter? Yes, it does matter. When people say, where are the women? Here they are. Here we are together, saying, we know we are the experts in trade, in these areas. And they're all on stage together. And they're all able to talk about, what does the global world look like in terms of trade right now? What does globalization look like? What do economic flows look like? What does growth look like? And it's great to have that image, as you said, of those women on stage, because it shows you that women are there, can be there, but it shows the power. And that leading that conversation, modeling that, and having that conversation is going to be so incredibly important, not just tomorrow, but to your point, going into Davos, because many of those women will be around those tables in Davos, and then coming out of Davos, but having those discussions that are on making sure that economic and business decisions include the whole workforce and the communities and the consumers with which businesses work.
So why was it important for you, as the leader of WBC, its CEO, its president, to bring that image together? Because clearly you had that vision to illustrate that on that stage on Martin Luther King weekend, and for you to arrange that, as the new leader of WBC, taking it into this year, it was a powerful choice for you to make, to organize that and to show that. So walk me through your thought process as the leader of WBC, that was candidly the first image that you wanted to project heading into this year, and ahead of Davos.
Well, candidly, Kevin, what is interesting is, we were looking, and I was looking specifically for women that had led globally and had led business. And so Dr. Ngozi Okonjo-Iweala popped up immediately, right? And then when I looked across and said, across the sort of women in trade in North America, I'm like, they're all women. They are all women of color. This is fantastic. This is an opportunity. But it really came from the necessity to show that, one, women business leaders are important and present, because I get questions often. People are like, I don't see, are there very many women? Where are the women? That sort of thing. That was the first thing. I think the second thing is, to Women Business Collaborative, what is incredibly important is showcasing the growth of women-led businesses and providing financing for women-led businesses. So think about XM Bank. They are there to help finance businesses. There are financing mechanisms and opportunities and options. You and I were speaking about those just last week, right? And so I wanted to show that there are people at the table making decisions that will grow business and that will grow businesses globally. I'm a global person. Women Business Collaborative is global. And quite frankly, in my opinion, this is a global world. This technology allows us to have an audience today that is global. So these women popped up because of their expertise, because of the ability to grow the global economy, and because of the commitment to growing, financing, and supporting women-owned businesses.
I think one of the things that I hear about frequently is just the notion that sometimes there's this, it's almost like there's two different worlds between big business and small business and medium-sized companies. And from your research and analysis that you've shared publicly through WBC, just showing the growth opportunity for small business entrepreneurs, for first-time entrepreneurs, to be able to roll up their sleeves to get financing from a small business perspective in, quite candidly, unfortunately, underserved communities that oftentimes have been overlooked, right? And so if you're a small business entrepreneur and you're watching this and hearing from you, Gwen, as the leader of the Women Business Collaborative, and you're seeing these big name organizations, the United States Export-Import Bank, the World Trade Organization, we're talking about the World Economic Forum in Davos. Sometimes it can feel like a different language, and it can feel really intimidating. And so I guess, what would your message be to that person, to that woman entrepreneur who has that business idea, but who might feel, and it's regardless of your gender, but might feel a little intimidated by the caliber of the conversation?
Well, business owners, my answer is, and this is going to sound a little marketing, is right, come to the Women Business Collaborative, because as we know, minority-owned businesses, receive less than 2% of, venture capital funding and debt funding. There is that access to it, and we work through
And
our
I
action.
hate to interrupt you, but I don't think people know that less than 2% of VC, venture capital liquidity, to use not to get too into the weeds, less than 2% go to minority-owned business. I don't think a lot of people know that. So I apologize for interrupting you, but I do think that bears repeating.
No, and to your point, Kevin, I think that is important to realize how little funding, arguably how many barriers there are to minority and women-owned businesses being able to access finance, whether that's angel, venture, debt, whatever type of capital you need. And so we and many of our partners, almost 20 in this space, have been working on this issue for a long time. So we've created an online class with Babson College called The Fundamentals of Capital to allow, a smaller business or someone starting out to learn the language. This is where the language, right? But to learn that language. We also held our first ever Women's Capital Summit last fall, where we had 85 women-owned businesses and 40 investors, all women, in the room together, talking about, your first need for capital all the way up to exiting your business. So really understanding the cycle of your finance and your needs, but most importantly, creating that network, right? Creating the network of who do I know? Where can I get the capital? Who can I ask? And for controllers and investors and people to also know like where the businesses are, right? And so creating that connection, creating that network. And that's where something like a Women Business Collaboratives of some of our partners, whether that's Astia, Springboard, WeBank, Enterprising Women Magazine, Enterprising Women, whether it's any of those groups, is, I always say, get involved, have that conversation, learn, because there are opportunities, there are people committed to that, but you've got to, both learn the language and do that, but join those groups, because groups like that are also working with the investors to open up those opportunities, to identify those businesses, and to create those relationships, because really growing your business, your capital needs change over time, but it comes through relationships between the investors and the businesses. And that's what Women Business Collaborative is trying to do.
So and then you have this whole other side of your portfolio, Gwen, where you're really planting the seeds for the next generation, and you're talking to girl dads or moms about the importance for STEM or STEAM even education, and how important it is to make sure that young women and girls are exposed to this type of conversation, and this type of financial literacy at an early age. So what efforts are you hoping to make this year in 2024 on that front?
In 2024, Kevin, I think, it goes back to what you were talking about. First of all, I think WBC and putting women experts on stage as experts like tomorrow, to talk about trade and global economy, so that younger women can see that there are women in seats of power, in positions of power, but more importantly, with the expertise, right? With the economic expertise or the tech expertise. So one of it is, who do we showcase? Having events and having those be as open to the public as possible so people can see. The second thing is really driving some conversations locally about, what is AI? How do you use AI, right? How do you get a career in tech? Do you have to have an engineering and a tech bachelor degree? The answer is you do not have to, right? There's a lot of efforts going on in the workforce right now, even at places like IBM, skilling up, trainings, that sort of thing. So that's the other piece, is being able to look at that and provide those opportunities to understand what the career pathways look like. And we do that through interviews, resources, and reports. We do that by showcasing the women. And then we have our WBC Champions Council, where we invite people to join and to network with, learn from, and be with women in their careers at every point in their careers, from in the beginning in their careers all the way up to the CEO and the C-suite, and building that networks. And I always say when I'm, talking to younger people, obviously go after your passion, but I say network as much as possible with men and with women. but go ahead and learn from people. How did they do it? How did they get there? Because I think, I don't know about you, but sometimes there's some myth busting. Nothing is a straight linear line all the time, right? And a lot of the best opportunities come from who you know, or taking an opportunity that you did not know existed, but dumping on that opportunity, and it takes your career you want it to be.
For sure. No, I think that's great. And you've always stressed that to me. You're like, show up, have that conversation, make sure you listen more than you speak. And all of those truisms that quite honestly my mom told me, but maybe went in one ear and out the other as a little kid. But sorry, mom. but they're now back. I gotta say, my first boss was my mom. Sorry, dad, for saying that. But growing up outside of Philadelphia in Delaware County, in Delco as it's called, and she would always say, she never cared if I had a blue check mark next to my name, or, she definitely doesn't care about how much you make. She cares if I make my bed every morning, and just those little things that can really add up. And so to see you, Gwen, take on this position for this year at this particular moment, I got to ask. I mean, you have such a vast wealth of experience and knowledge. What made you want to take this challenge and accept this job as the leader at WBC?
So I took this challenge, came to WBC, and what I hope to do at WBC, based on one is my true commitment to equal opportunity for all. And I want to stress that when I say equal opportunity, it's the opportunity, right? Not everybody wants to be CEO. Not everybody wants to be a president, right? But I want to create that opportunity, and that's what I felt in all of my career. I've always felt that we work better together, whether it's collaborative within a sector or across sectors. So like you've alluded, right? I had a career in international development for close to 30 years, right? But I would always go and meet with businesses or meet with people that were not in the international development space to have conversations about international development. I was always a firm believer, like, you want to bring everybody to the table. I remember at one point when we were talking about women in policy and politics, I was saying that, but the mayor of a city could hire somebody that came out of Cisco, right? They still may have this experience that a city needs, whether it's tech or economic growth, strategic planning, finance. So why are we siloing people, right? And that's truly what I believe in. So that's where I think what I bring is, different viewpoints to kind of the business community and the business landscape. I bring the commitment to working together and a true commitment across not just businesses, but alliances, nonprofits, international development, INGOs. Let's bring everybody together to talk about this, because, economic empowerment of everybody in the community is so important. And economic empowerment of women, is driving communities. It's driving the GDP. I think the figure is women own businesses and drive about 37% of the GDP, right? So let's include them in business conversations. Let's include them in leadership conversations in government. And for me, what I love to do is just, work across sectors, carry the message, and bring people together in the room and get them to agree to get behind an initiative, behind a task, or create an event together where we can have this kind of conversation and say, how are we going to solve this? What are we going to do to make a difference?
Last question for you before I let you go. And again, thank you so much for having me for this conversation. It's New Year's resolution time, whether or not people like it. What is your call to action for this year? And what do you think people should consider their call to action be on a very micro personal level on these issues for 2024?
I think my call to action, on a micro personal level, is sort of the same on the other level, right? Is that stay the course and be committed to being inclusive and listening and understanding where somebody is. Kevin, just like there's so much in the news that suggests divisiveness, that suggests polycrisis or the world's in chaos, and it can seem overwhelming, right? And so, there's the gratitude, but let's sit down and realize that there's so much we can do together. There's so much. You started off this LinkedIn Live by saying there's growth and momentum in the economy. Let's not forget that. So let's sit and realize where somebody else sits. Let's sit and listen in here, and let's sit and find out how we can all agree together and how we can understand where each person is and where they're. I think that act of outreach, doing outreach to somebody, listening to them, and finding out, how they're doing and what you can do together will really create both that positive momentum, but help us understand and overcome some of this feeling of it's white or black, right? It's black or white. right? But feel that we can work together to drive change. We can remain positive, and we can build on the growth and momentum and all of the opportunity that's happening.
I love it. I love that sense of gratitude and momentum. I think it's a perfect note to end on. Gwen, congratulations leading into tomorrow. I know it's an incredibly groundbreaking event, an historic one to have so many of those figures on stage in global trade and women leaders in global trade, especially ahead of the World Economic Forum. So thank you so much for breaking that down for us, and best of luck this year.
Thank you, Kevin, and thank you to everybody. But I look forward to working with you this year, Kevin. I look forward to seeing what Women Business Collaborative and what the economy and what the business landscape